So I'm trained as a building architect, very classically, at a time where we didn't talk so much about urban space, and we didn't talk about landscape, and we didn't talk a lot about who we designed the city for or the buildings. So I think there has been a lot of change in the way that we educate today than I was educated as. My training is from the public sector, and that was probably what you were saying, that I've been the city architect in Copenhagen and in a suburban area to Copenhagen as well. So I know a lot about city making in bigger cities, and I know a little bit of how to do cities in suburban areas. Today I'm the director of something called the Danish Town Planning Institute. So right now I'm also learning a lot about how to plan in rural areas and in small cities as a part of that. So the Danish Town Planning Institute is a small NGO where we are 12 people that is working with different aspects of planning in general, both city making but also planning in the whole of Denmark. Feel welcome to sit in front. It's an institute, an independent institute, where we give knowledge to almost all the cities in Denmark. There is 98 municipalities, so they are a part of our client group. So we advise politicians and stakeholders in general, architects and city makers on a broader scale. It's an organization that will celebrate 103 years birthday this year. It's an old organization then, but we have always been having this name of laboratorium. And in the old days, it was different people from different sectors. It was health people, doctors, planners, architects, biologists, different kind of people for more than 100 years ago that went together because they thought that planning should be something cross-sector, and they couldn't find that anywhere in Denmark. So they gathered together to try to share the knowledge about planning. And in 47, the group were designing the finger hand, or the finger plan, do you know that? Yeah. Copenhagen is here. And then the suburban areas go into the fingers, and the landscape come into the middle. That plan is still the formal plan that we plan the whole region around Copenhagen, the greater Copenhagen from. But it was an informal plan that became a formal plan. And I think today, looking back, I think that is something that we will also do in the future, that planning is something we do together. We share it with our different experience, both the citizens, but also, of course, all the different competences that is a part of planning the society. But this is an old organization, and I still think that I'm so proud that I now will be a part of this group. I don't think you have a sister. We have a sister organization here. Do we? No. But we will share knowledge with you as well. So, and if you come to Denmark, we will always invite you for having conversations about planning in general. I will talk about feeling the city, and I will talk about it, what it means for me, also personally, and how we might embrace it a little more in our way of talking about planning system. And then I will talk a little about what I've been doing in Copenhagen and end up with some of my learnings from my period, both as city architects, but also what I've learned elsewhere. I will begin with this feeling, the city. This is my own roof terrace. Some of my friends standing there, and it is at the west side. It's an old listed building with good old Danish bricks. It's designed in 37. And when you come up there, The day has ended, work has been coming to an end. We go up there and the sun has been warming up this wall for many, many hours. And it is like it is attracting us. So we always go to this wall. We don't sit at the tables, but we just sit at the wooden floor because we want to sit and take out the last sun of the day. The sun has been going down, but the wall is still warm. And this feeling is something that makes us happy, and it is also a way of being in the city in a different ways. So it has a lot to do with the materials that we built our cities with as a part of it. It is also about the way that we are in the city. In Copenhagen, you can swim in the harbor. We couldn't do that 25 years ago. One of my colleagues, Jan, he is still in the city administration. 25 years ago, he began to talk about this possibility that we might clean the harbor so that we could swim in it, and people were laughing at him. But he convinced one of the mayors. We have a Lord Mayor in Copenhagen and 6 other mayors, but he convinced one of the mayors that it might be a possible thing that we could do one day. And she took it as her vision for the city. And soon after that, it became an overall political vision, and we started to clean the water. And what is fantastic today is that we can feel the water. You can almost swim everywhere. And the feeling of getting the cold water in our everyday life on the skin is an amazing feeling. I did a small video together with an Irish journalist last summer, and we were starting the whole video with jumping into the water, both of us, while they were filming. So I also think that it is now a part of the story of Copenhagen. But feeling the city is also the landscape, the smells, what the eyes see, and therefore nature is a big thing in the way of feeling the city. We can have small spaces where we can create our own landscape around it. In Copenhagen, this is one photo. You can see there is still some snow that I took passing my way along the harbor side. So feeling the city is also to feel that the rain is there. It is also feeling that the snow is there. I was just talking with the Danish ambassador today that said it will never be possible to bicycle in Rīgā because in wintertime it snows. So people will never bike in this condition. We can see on statistic that in wintertime it only goes down around 25% when the bicycling. So all of us is bicycling also when there is a lot of snow. And the reason we can do it is that the maintenance people is cleaning all the snow on the bike lanes as the first thing in the morning. So the maintenance people have been they have been changing the culture of maintenance. So the first thing, as I said, is to go and prepare the bike lane for the kids to go to school. But you can say, do we enjoy it? Yeah, I think it's a nice way of feeling the flow of the year. Welcome. There is a seat in front. Hello. In general, there is 65% of everybody that lives in the city goes by bike every day for school or for work or whatever it is. So I guess that you could do the same here in Rīgā if the politician would invest in the bike lanes. To feel the city is also to feel the freedom to take responsibility yourself, to have the freedom to design the city yourself. I guess everybody has been in Paris, and I guess that a lot have been taking this reference of the gardens where you can move the chairs and you can decide if you want to get in the sun or you can decide if you want to be in the shadow. You can decide to sit close to your friends or you can decide to have the feeling of being just on your own. In Copenhagen, another architect did the same in front of our museum, our National Library and our National Art Museum, Statens Museum for Kunst. And one day I came by, I saw a school class that was playing in the water. So they had been taking the chairs we had there, and then they were standing on the chairs, and then they were jumping in this piece of art, feeling the freedom to play in a different way than if you play on a normal playground. So I think freedom is a lot to do with feeling the city, that you have the freedom to choose and to do different things. Feeling the city is also to talk about the surfaces that is around the city. This is both a public space, it is also a schoolyard, it is also for training different kind of sports. So it is a multidisciplinary place in the middle of Copenhagen. It was before it was this plaza, it was a car parking area. But the way that it is designed, it is Kobe Architect that designed it, is also a way of sitting and lying down and doing different stuff. So feeling the city is the freedom, and feeling the city is the community, the space that we share together. Feeling the city is the sound of water and the attraction to the water. And feeling the city is also the way that you feel the inside space or the outside space from the inside space. This is a very bad photo, and I try to see if I can take one that is better. But feeling the city is to be there and experience it in real. So I try to explain. It's the National Playhouse, and it is designed by Lundgaard and Tranberg, and they decided it inside the foyer, so dark that when people are there, they lower down the space. And when they lower down the space, it feels a little bit more quiet in this big, huge foyer of the National Playhouse. But the most amazing thing is that when you are inside this space, you take the chairs and you put them at the window, and then you're able to see the water because of the darkness inside. So feeling the city is also how you can get the feeling, the notion of the city with you inside the indoor spaces. So therefore the houses and the buildings are also a part of talking about the feeling of the city in general. And feeling the city, of course, is also the details. It's very difficult sometimes to put a hand grip into a detailed plan in the planning department, but it means something how we enter home, how we enter a door, how we enter school. This is a school door, so all the kids, when they come to school, they have this beautiful handle to touch every day they go in. And feeling the city is, of course, how we can take care of the rainwater. This is one of the new urban spaces in Copenhagen. It's a courtyard, and there is a system from old days when Copenhagen was bankrupt. Back in the 90s, the city was put under administration, and at that time the state made a program where everybody could apply for a free green yard if your yard was worn out, if you could maintain the area yourself on a within democracy. So you need to organize people that was living in the yard, and you had to get it free of cars. You had to take care of all the rainwater, and then of course you had to maintain it itself. And this program is still an ongoing program where every Copenhageners can have this free green space. And now it is a part of how we also take care of the rainwater in the whole of Copenhagen. So feeling the city is to allow not being afraid of the water and the kids playing with the water. A lot of people is talking about the sickness, what could happen if you drink the water, or what could happen if you fall down into the water. But I think that a part of understanding society today is that we need to learn very early on to take responsibility ourselves so that we can have the freedom with that responsibility when we grow up and have an open and inviting city. To feel a city can also be bad feelings. This is the feeling of noise, and it comes because of this. This is a suburban area to Copenhagen, Gladsaxe, where I also was the city architect. And what I never understood, I'm not a car person. I have a driving license. I'm new in traffic, but now I have a driving license. But I never knew, actually, when I was driving into Copenhagen, that I was driving through the city where people were living, because we have these walls, the noise walls, but they don't take that much noise. So the experience is very bad when you go in by car. And what I experienced when I came into this neighborhood was that you cannot live there and still respect the noise level. So when we build new kindergartens in this neighborhood, we have to cover them so that the kids can play there without too much noise. When we build new homes, we have to make special windows so that people can sleep without the noise. And that's the same almost all over the world. That noise today is so much that people are getting stressed about it. So people living here have 30% more risk for having heart attacks, diabetes. A lot of welfare sickness is mostly, or people living close to highways is having a bigger risk than other people. So the experience here is that it feels very, very badly on your side. And then people say by electric cars it will be a totally other situation. But it won't, because the noise is from the wheel and the asphalt. And electric cars are heavier than diesel cars. And the wheel is broader than normal wheels. So the noise, when it goes above 40 kilometers an hour, is a lot bigger by electric cars than it is by normal cars, or what the cars we understood of today. I won't say we should not have electric cars. Of course we are going to have that. But the noise problem and the experience space by it is a way too, or is already a way too much, but it will only become bigger. So we need to talk about this feeling, and we need to get the conversation about feelings back into the rational system of discussing transport. We also feel bad when we are in houses that have where you cannot open the window. When I am in England, there is a lot of hotels where the window cannot open. At my hotel here, I can open the window, and I love it. So the first thing I do is to cut off the ventilation and the noise from that, and feel the air comes in my room. But if we look ahead, I can see also in the building regulation in Denmark that would not be the case in the future. So already the measurable world is now talking about that if we need to control the indoor climate, we need to control it 100%, which means that the human freedom, is no longer allowed if we want to be in the space. And also being a woman, turned 50 some years ago, I can say that by being a woman, we need to have the possibility and the freedom to open the window, because getting old, and I don't know the English word for, but all the old women here probably have the feeling of getting too hot. So we need to be able to open the window. And by that I just want to say that we as human beings are diverse. So if we look back in the world where we designed all the highways last century, we designed the world as human beings were alike, that we were the same kind of type of person, and that if we could just have this indoor climate of 21 degrees, then everybody would be happy. If we designed the ideal kitchen, all women preparing food would be happy. If we designed the ideal apartment for a family of a man and a woman and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, then everybody would be happy. And we thought that we could design the ideal world in last century when we were designing new neighborhoods and designing cities in general. So feeling the city is to try to understand that we are very diverse as human beings as well. This photo is just to show you that it was a process I had in Gladsaxe. It's a detailed plan. It's not a beautiful building, but when it was decided by the investor with you had a staircase, and then you went from the staircase 2 apartments, and the next floor 2 apartments, and the next floor 2 apartments. Then the investor thought that it would be easier if we just had 1 staircase and not 8 staircases. Then it would be cheaper. And he asked the politician if he was allowed to do that. And the politician thought, well, it's just the same building, so feel free to do that. So he got a dispensation for doing that. And you don't have to understand this plan, but the experienced notion of that was that now, before you said you could go home, you could open 1 door, you had the elevator, you came home, there was another door. What there is now, when you only have 1 staircase, and then you have long balconies to go into all the different apartments, then you come to the first floor, and you go in here. You go to the elevator, or go to the staircase, and then there is the first door. Then you come up here, and then you go. This is because of fire regulation, because when you take that decision from 1 staircase, or from 8 staircases to 1 staircase, the consequence is that the fire regulation become more complicated. So this space is a small fire regulation something. Then you open another door. Then you go out here, and you will live on 3rd floor. So you need to go into this, take the staircase. Again, this is a fire zone. You open the door again, and then you go here, and then you go home to your kitchen here. So you go from 2 doors now to 7 doors. And when I talked about that with the client, he was a little bit surprised and sad, but it was too late because he had ordered all the concrete elements, and he has spent so many money in designing this process. The architect that was at the table, she was the 3rd architect, and she has just been taking over the project from another architect that has been taking over from another architect. So the situation was nobody was talking about it as a home any longer. It was just a building project like everything else that has to be done. And the reason I talk about this is that it is so important that we have those conversations about how do we feel coming home and how do we want people to feel when they're coming home. The investors, I asked him, would you love to stay there yourself? And he said, no, I don't want to stay there. I want another apartment where I don't have to open 7 doors for coming home. I think they got some kind of electric stuff so that you could open the door by not taking your bag on the floor. Feeling the cities, the bad feeling can also be that you are feeling excluded. This is my son, and we were on a route, and we should pass to the other highways. This was not an inviting way of getting people to bike or to walk more. And as a woman, I feel very bad. I would never go into tunnels like that because I always, or women in general, feel that somebody that is bigger and stronger than them might be in the tunnel. This is from another parking. I think you know them. This is the suburban area that I was working in. This is all the kids because it's complicated there is no safe route for being on bike. So the kids will be driven by the parents to do the sports activities in the evening. And because of that, everybody is driving there. And then we have parking areas like this. So if you have to go in and do some sport, you have to pass this landscape of cars. And that makes you feeling unsafe, especially as kids, where you can't see above the cars. Feeling uninvited and unsafe is also if there isn't possibilities to sit down. When I was, I've been talking a lot with older people when there was COVID. You probably experienced the same. We were more out, we were walking more, but old women does not walk that much because they need to sit down. That's also old men. Old women does not want because they can't find a toilet anywhere, public toilets. It's easier for men. So there is a lot of things that if we have to feel safe and feel good, we need to think about it when we are designing the city. This is feeling unsafe to sit having your cigarettes behind a car. And feeling the city is in general also of the way of how you walk as a pedestrian. This route was, we were designing an architecture policy in Gladsaxe, and I was interviewing a lot of people in the process. This was a boy that was in 9th grade by the end of his primary school. And he has been drawing this line from home to school. And we were having a conversation about that line. And he said, the crossing here in the left or in the corner, the crossing up there where he just had to pass a normal road, you can say. He has been using that every day when he went to school, and he was saying that it was a little bit, every morning and every day he went home, he was stressed about this crossing because he couldn't pass it while it was green light. He had always to run. And I told him, well, I will just change that because I know the woman with the traffic light in the administration, so I will go and talk with her, I said. And I went to Biljana, and I asked her, can you change it so that the kids have time enough so that they can pass the light before going to school? And she said, she was looking at me like I was the most naive city architect she had ever met, and she was saying, well, this is the way all traffic lights are designed, that we have to stress people to go over. Otherwise, we have more measurable traffic accident. So the way we organize to have less traffic accident is to stress the weakest point in the system. And I guess it's the same here. So for me, I just learned that that's a global code that we have decided is the right code to feel the city, that we will stress everybody. And when I talked with some of the administration in the ministry about this, she was, the woman, the last time I was talking with one about it, she was getting angry at me because she was, by the end of the day, she was asking, do you really, really want that more kids are getting killed in traffic? And I said, no, I won't. That's not my dream, but I think that we need to have conversations where we might find other solutions, that what we have been coding ourselves to is the right way of designing the city. So in a lot of ways, there is this notion of the conversation. And this is the last example of the bad feelings. It's also from one of our projects in my suburban city, Gladsaxe. The building here is a kindergarten. It's a fantastic kindergarten. It's sustainable, it has getting a lot of prizes, it's the best indoor climate. You can't say anything bad about the building except entering the building. And when I went around in this city in the beginning of my period out there, I took these photos and then I showed it to the politician and said, are you aware that this very, very sustainable building is designed very good to the edge, but not how to enter? And the politicians were quite amazed about it and said, no, we didn't realize that. But in the administration, probably the same here, they work with the building and the playground around it, but they don't have the responsibility for the area. That's the maintenance people. It's another group of people that have the responsibility for that area with the car. So, and they, in a way, we have not organized our conversations in the municipalities in a way where people is actually talking together at the beginning of the process, so that it is possible to walk to this kindergarten. So when I was observing people, I could see that the father, if he was walking, most of them took the car because it's designed for cars, but some of them were walking. And then the kids were in front and the father had to go in the back because you cannot walk two persons to go to the door here. So, feeling the city must be a present conversation in everything we do as city makers and place makers. And I don't know how we can organize it always, but we need in time to have this conversation from the beginning. And I guess that it is, in a way, it is a new way of working where we find the balance between the measurable and the experience. Of course, we need the measurable. We need the engineer view in city making, but we cannot have it without having the architect's view as well. So we need this balance between the controlled and the uncontrolled, between the rational and the irrational, between the built and the natural organic life, and the measurable and the experienced. So it's not that we should do everything in another way, but I guess we need to put time and organizational frameworks for having conversations in the beginning of the process where we are equal in the measurable and the experienced, and that we acknowledge both the perspectives. Yeah? Anyone having any questions? Or it's okay if you have some reflection. I will talk a little bit about my inspirations, because in a way this is so banal. It is so banal, and there is nothing new in it. But when we start the process, it just go out that the measurable will be everything by the end of the day. We talk about CO2 reduction. It's numbers. And I don't think that people not being in this room know what those numbers stand for. I can't explain to normal people what does it mean when we make a reduction on 30% of CO2. I know that it is good, but I can't explain to them what the experience of it would be. And I think that's the same when we talk about certifications, when we talk about traffic accidents, when we talk about square meters. Investors always talk about money, but most of the time when we talk about architecture and cities, we talk about something that is measurable. How tall is a building? It's not about the experience of it, but it is how tall it is. And in the beginning of the process, we talk about a built percentage of 150, 6 floor high. It's always about the measurable issues. But somebody else a lot of people has been talking about this. My inspirations come from a Danish architect, Sten Eiler Rasmussen. He has been written this book about how to experience architecture. You know that one? It's a first-year book in the architecture school in Copenhagen, and I think I reread it every third year, something like it, because it is so banal and it is so good, and it is a very inspiring book. But a lot of other ones, Juhani Pallasmaa has been talking about this for all his time, Adam Caruso, Peter Zumthor, but from different aspects. From a Danish aspect, there is Jan Gehl. Everybody knows him? Yeah? Yeah! He's married to Ingrid Gehl. You know her? it's a very typical man-female story, if you want to put those words on it. Ingrid is a sociologist, and Jan is when he talks about his learning of experience society, he always talk about him and Ingrid walking around in Italian cities. And she is a sociologist and he's an architect, and the different perspective made them to write the books. In 1971, she wrote this book about how the housing, the neighborhood would be, and he was writing this book about life between the buildings. And this is the book that is translated and not the other one. And the other one is so good. But Jan was also very inspired by Jane Jacobs, and she was an activist. And for me, that activistic approach also to city planning is a part of my understanding of how we can engage ourselves, but also how we can engage the civic society. But what he also, or they all learned me also, was this way of that understanding the city as city makers and architects is that we need to learn how to observe society. And we just been at I went to the cemetery, the great cemetery yesterday, and I couldn't have been during this competition if it was not, if I have not been there, because then I understood, I couldn't understand what the place is about. And just by being there some hours and observe where people come from, where do they stop, where do they talk, where do they look up, where do they look down, and how do they enter this area, is a very important way of understanding. And all my colleagues in administration, I always said that I cannot discuss the projects with you if you have not been there. So it was always a way of getting out and observe society. But Jan Gehl also learned me how to understand the human understanding and how to read our way of behavior and what is in common and what is not in common. So it is in common that we, by having eye contact, become or start to smile. So if we have eye contact, we smile to each other. And therefore it is so important that we have smaller spaces in the city, because it makes us feel safe if we can have the feeling that you're okay, because you smile to me and I'm not afraid of you. And he has a lot of good learnings about how to design the cities for human beings. But in 2014, I went to the Biennale in Venice. This is the Danish pavilion. And I learned a lot about what nature means to us. And I guess that all of us is understanding that we need to be more in contact with nature. I can see that a lot have happened since 2010, when I began in the city administration in Copenhagen, and how we as societies is embracing nature today. Stig was telling me, Stig Lindert Andersen was writing this book about that we need again the balance between architecture, that we cannot do building design if we don't have landscape architects. So we need this understanding of the landscape. And this changed also the Copenhagen view. So I had my mayor with me to this Biennale, and my director was there as well. And we had Stig Lindert Andersen to tell us about his observations of understanding nature. And it meant that when we came back to Copenhagen, we did a new strategic paper on how to deal with urban nature, how to talk about the quality of it, not only the quantity, again, the measurable and the experience, but also when is nature good for biodiversity and for sensing the society in general. That was some of my inspirations. In the city administration, I always said that if we should talk with developers, we always need to have the landscape architect on board from the beginning. Otherwise, it would be building architects designing landscape, And some are good of it, but mostly it would be straight lines because we are trained differently. So when we came back from this exhibition, we were having a different view on how to work with the city life in general and how to work also with our architecture policy. So it was an ongoing understanding of what does it mean when we put people first in our strategic papers and in our architecture policy. And I won't go deeply into this policy, but the architecture policy was decided in 2017. And right now they are in the middle of hiring a new city architect in Copenhagen, and I know that they are in the process as well with designing a new architecture policy. But I guess it will be based on the same understanding of human beings, but I guess also that it might add on some new knowledge about sustainability, about preserving the buildings we have so we don't build so much new. I hope it would be a lot about recycling materials as a part of it. But we translate this understanding of the human being in the architecture policy, and we try to explain what it means that we don't need, if we have fences, it should always be lower than 150, because then you can have eye contact above it. That we need transparency in our ground floors so that we can have eye contact between the life inside and the life outside. That we need to have homes where we can open the windows, have small balconies so we can have fresh air, that we can go outside almost everywhere, that we have 40% of recreational area in all the projects we are doing in housing projects, so that we know that people's health has a lot to do with the possibility to get out. We say that housing buildings should only be 12 meters maximum, because we need daylight from both sides, and we need it in the middle of the building, because we know that when daylight goes into our brain, endorphins are released, and endorphins is our happiness, or a part of it. We know that if we have meetings outside, the meetings would be faster and without conflicts. So if you have a very hard meeting, you should put the table outside, because then people would have another conversation if it is inside. We know that if you train, it is better, or it is more effective if you train outside than if you train inside the buildings. We know that if we design the lines, the movement in the city, not as a straight line but curved, so that the eyes and the brain would experience diversity, then we will be more happy than just by going on a straight line. We know that if we design the pavement as a coherent area in the city, the cars have to stop for the pedestrian, then we know that people walk more. It's not a beautiful pedestrian or beautiful pavement, but it works. So you can tell your kids that you can go to school just by following the pedestrian area. And we know in this strategic paper we put this measurable things, because you can also measure on the irrational. But we put this in that we want people to stay outside 20% more, which means that this is a political mandate, which means that when we talk with the stakeholders and investors, we can have a conversation about how can we get people to be outside instead of inside the building. And he have to have that conversations together with us. And in the built environment, it means that we are very aware on the function at ground floor, how the facade is looking, the transparency in it, but also how we design the urban floor, the city room. And it means that there is this edge-shown strategic paper telling us how to do it. And it means now that we can see around the city, this is just some photos from a neighborhood called Nordhavn, Northern Harbor. But we can see now that they can sell the apartment ground floor, which they couldn't do before. So in the beginning, the investors were angry. They thought that we were over-regulating the ground floors. But now they come back and say thank you, because it's also good on the measurable when we talk about money. And we know this is a sports building. We know that more people do sports if they can look inside the building and see what people are doing inside. In our architecture policy, we also put some guidelines for how to work with the design of the building to feel the city. So the feeling of the city is much more nice if we can see people in the building, also when we look up. So on balconies, we say that people are not allowed to make balconies that are not transferable. So they have to have some kind of transparency, so that the life on the balconies can have eye contact with the life on the street. And it means that the feeling of the city becomes totally different if we feel that somebody is taking care of us because they have the eyes on us from above. And we also know that the daylight is the one that releases endorphins, so therefore we also talk a lot about daylight in the built environment. We know that physical activity, so the photo you saw before as well, we know that if we try to design playgrounds that is not designed on the rational way, saying that this is for small kids, this is for 6 to 10 years, this is for teenagers, this is for grown-ups, but if we try to design playgrounds that invite everybody, we know that the community would be nicer, and we also know that people will stay outside for a longer period than if you're just looking at your kid playing and dreaming about the coffee you're going to have when you come home. And in this strategic paper, we also talk about how we engage people in the process, that we need to have this co-create city making. And this is one of my favorite statements. It's from a Danish researcher, Annika Ager, because she says that we should, as city administration, we should work differently. But she also says that people, the civic society, should think differently from what we were learned to in last century. So in the modern welfare system, we learned that somebody would clean after us. We learned that it was always somebody's fault if something was wrong. And we learned that it has nothing to do with me, but it has something to do with somebody else. So she is saying, and a lot of others, Sigmund Baumann, a lot of other thinkers have been talking about this for years, that we need to learn to take responsibility. And therefore it is also very important that the kids are learning to take responsibility themselves. So therefore we have the open schoolyard and stuff like that. This is from my former own yard, and it was the part of this program I told you before, where we should having a community in the garden, but should take care of it ourselves. I've been trying to work with kids building also, building the projects and taking part of that, to take the responsibility in a different way. There is a lot of discussion about what if they eat the painting, whose responsibility is it then, but nothing was going wrong in this process. And one of the new things last year in the Town Planning Institute, last year we had a theme about democracy and planning in general. And one of the things, and this is a Danish, is that there is a whole new movement of citizens' assemblies. I don't know if there has been anyone here in Rīgā, but it is a way where you agree on a specific process, where you find out people can apply for being a part of this panel, and then we try to get a representative of the people in a specific neighborhood. Then they have half a year, at least 20 hours, where they are trained in understanding city planning, city making, the site, the specific challenge in a specific project. and then they come with some recommendations for the politicians. And this is Peter MacLeod. He was having the keynote for our conference last year, and the photo is from Copenhagen, where we did the first citizens' assemblies for the middle-aged part of the city, where we ask the local people and other Copenhageners to come with the recommendation for how we could handle car in that area. And what was interesting was that the civic society was much more ambitious than we in the administration and also than the politicians. And when you talk with Peter and all his colleagues doing processes like this is a common thing, that every time they see this recommendations for the politician, they are always more ambitious than the administration themselves and the politicians themselves. And I find that really interesting. And I think we can have a lot of learning, because it can sometimes be a big process. But this understanding that you cannot ask people what they want, you need to help them to understand that it's not about what you want, but it is about what we can agree on in this. And you represent not only yourself, but you also represent a group. And by understanding that we represent somebody instead of that I think and I want, then we begin to have other conversations. So that is one of the good learnings about it. And I also think that one other good learning is that it takes time, and that we cannot agree, because if we could agree, it would be very boring cities and neighborhoods and projects, because as a human group, we are all diverse, and each one of us are single persons. In Copenhagen, in the architecture policy, we have this invitation and try to also to make people to take the responsibility. This is the edge zone, 60 centimeters, that is free, so everybody can do whatever, almost, within some regulations, so that handicapped people and other diverse group could be a part of it. And we invite people also to take care of the maintenance themselves, which means that we need to accept that the aesthetic of nature is diverse, so that green grass might be the right way for some people, but for other people it might be something differently. And especially our maintenance people are trained in having one way of looking at nature, and that is the cut green grass. But by giving the responsibility to the local, we sometimes get different aesthetic in it. To work with people is also to get the knowledge from the local. This is get new knowledge for a new bicycle strategic paper. So it was on Facebook where we were asking people, where is it difficult to cross the street? Where do we need a shortcut? And I can't remember the third question, but within 24 hours, the map was designing itself. And it was knowledge we didn't have in the administration, because we don't know the everyday life everywhere, of course. So by asking these questions about people's life, it's really a good help in designing the city. And this project is a project by one of the investors that was building. It's just a building, it's not very special. But what is special is this area here. Because this was Skanska, and they were just wanting to build this building, and they wanted to get rid of what was there. But they were staying there before. They had some small red storage building here that was illegal. But instead of just saying, well, you now don't have any storage building, the architect and the investor, they began to design new storage for the people that was already here. And they can have that for very cheap money, which means now that the city life is there before the new building were there. And I know some of the people living in this building, very old people that was coming from the countryside, 80 years old, and into the city. And they were so, they thought it was so nice that there was life on the street already when they moved in this area. And the last photo of this strategic paper where we designed the city life strategy, talking about the urban nature, designing the architecture policy. A part of that is also that we can see that the developers is following up now. So this was another one of our developer, a private developer, and he began to facilitate city life because he could see that this facilitating the city actually was also a way of creating a good life from the beginning. So he has been organizing that he hired people to help people to put greenery on the roof and in the yard. And we can see that in a lot of projects now, that it is a part of the developers' investment is that they also invest in the facilitating. In the old days, we had a lot of, I don't know the English word, handyman that could fix thing. Then there has been a big period where handyman were too expensive, but now new kind of handyman will come into the projects. So that was a little bit about the strategic paper, mostly from Copenhagen. And I can see when I talk with cities in general that working more strategically is something I guess will come more and more. We were talking a little bit about it this morning, if there is some new strategic papers coming in for Rīgā. I can see that it began in Copenhagen 2006, 7, 8, 9. We began to have a strategic view on bicycle. We had the first sustainable strategic paper. We designed the first city life strategy in 2009 together with architects. And today it is an ongoing part that we do different strategic papers. And of course, it makes it complex because they also need to work together. And sometimes there is dilemmas in the papers. But the city making is complex in general. So, you can say, one of the learnings, so that's the last part, some learnings. And feel free to ask. One of the learnings is, of course, to find this balance between the measurable and the experienced. And the other one is this thinking strategically, that we need to have strategic plans that goes citywide. We need to be clear in our site-specific understanding, which end up in Denmark or in Copenhagen with the detailed plan. And we need to have connection with the building permission and all the small permissions that we are giving in the city, so that the people working with permissions need to work together with people working with the site-specific plans, and the site-specific people, or the people working with the planning department, need to have conversations with the different kind of strategic people. So in an everyday life, I don't know, is there anyone working in the city administrations here? In general life, it's difficult, right? To get to know the one that knows something about traffic, and to get to know and have the conversation in time with the planning process you are having here. It's often two different groups of politicians. So the politicians over here don't know what the politicians do over here, and they have some money and they have some money, and they don't talk together. So therefore, it's very difficult also for the administration to work together. So it sounds easy, and in everyday life, it is so complicated. I also learned that we need to be aware that in all the things where I can see that cities is actually doing well, it is when there is an amount of visionary politicians. So we can't do anything if the politicians don't want to do it. We can't change to more bicycle if the politicians do not invest in bicycle. We can't change the cities to have more greenery if there isn't any budget for it. We can't change the city life if the politicians don't think about the height of the building. So we need the politicians to get into the room, also the room where we know something about city making. And politicians have another background, so they don't know anything about it when they begin to be politicians. And we, of course, have to respect that it is also something that they should learn. And we need to have a strong leadership inside the cities. We need to have space for creativity in the administration. Charles Landry has been writing a book about creative bureaucracy. I fancy that a lot, with a lot of respect as well for hierarchy. So I think we both need hierarchy vertically, but we need a lot hierarchies that goes across. In Copenhagen and in Gladsaxe and in other Danish cities, the city architect is not in silos, but is a cross-sector person. And then we need to have the best landscape architect, designers, researchers, engineers, the people from the outside of the administration. We need to have spaces where we talk and have conversations together. In Copenhagen, I always invited different kind of people into the administration, and then we had conversations and debates as a group inside the administration. And we did go on study trips, so we learned something from other cities, both from Denmark and abroad. We also designed a think tank because we had to get new knowledge about how to work with the rainwater. So therefore we did a think tank for half a year in the city administration, where we invited thinkers and practitioners to help us to understand the complexity of it. And we had it organized so that the mayor and the director was a part of it, and that all my colleagues in the different departments also was a part of this think tank. So we need all three circles to make good cities for and with people. And then this, of course, cross-sector that that is so complicated, but gets more and more necessary to understand. Now I should put maybe also the G5, that's the name as well as here, right? The new internet, the fast internet. I thought it was something invisible in the air, this fast speed internet, until I realized that it means that now we need to put up pillars more densely than we did before. And it's very banal that the speed of it is because you put more of them in the space, and it's not something invisible in the air as such. So we need to put the internet as a part of that as well. Then we need, or my learning is that the regional planning or the edge, I don't know what another word can be, but that we need to always look at the edge of an area. And often we forget it because we look in the middle of the urban space, or this is the building, or this is the neighborhood, or this is the city's border. And then we forget how we connect with everything. So I think that in all projects we need to find the edge and go along the edge and see if we can find some new friends along the edge to work together with. And then, as I also said before, the on-site conversations. This is my former mayor. It's Nina in the middle, one of my directors and a student. And we were to understand, that was the edge of two neighborhoods. We need to understand how we could connect the two neighborhoods. And we looked at the map, and in a way we couldn't really understand it. So we took the bike out there and tried to experience what was the dilemmas here. And the dilemma was that on the map we couldn't see that you couldn't bike here, but when we went there we could see that there was a barrier, and that if we need people to make it as a shortcut for bikes, we need to design that differently. And the on-site conversation is also with our citizens and and other people. And I can see that I've been having so many guided tours with the people living in Copenhagen. And I stopped as city architect in 19, and so often when I walk at the street, people say, you're the former city architect. And I don't know them, but I know that it is probably because we are having a lot of guided tours. And when I ask them if I know them, they say, we had a guided tour once when you showed us something. And so sometimes I think it's too many people to guide, but I think that it goes like rings in the water. And when you tell people about how to experience the city, it's 1 hour and you have changed the way that they look at the city afterward. And I think that's a good hour investment if you can help people to experience the city differently. Right now in my new institute, we have designing a course that I want to explode. So it is a course for people to understand city making. It's a 3-hour course or a 3-evening course. First course is the language of architecture. The second course is to go out in the city to see something new and old and use the language. And the third course is how to engage yourself in city making, in understanding and meeting the people in the administration. And I love it. And I think now I want to train people to do it, so that it can be a movement. That's a nice movement, right? City makers of tomorrow, so that is also one of my learning, has to, of course, design the city with water management in mind. We can do anything anywhere without knowing a lot more about how to manage rainwater or the racing sea or groundwater, how we can have water by the end of the day. And if we use it as something visible, and if we use it, this is a new park, an old park that is restored, but it is working with the everyday rain. And it means just by this rain that would be there now means that there is a lot of birds that wasn't there before. So by having water as a part of the design elements means that there would be a lot of other species in general. And it makes us feel the place a lot more. Some of the last learnings is that today in Copenhagen we talk a lot, in Denmark, I don't know how much it is globally still, but we are building less and transforming more. And this is from Northern Harbour, and it was a competition in 2010. We did the detailed plan in 2011. And today it is a very interesting project in a lot of ways, but also because we kept all the old buildings that didn't have any value, normally architectural value, but we kept it because we wanted it to be a part of the identity. I think today we keep it, of course, of identity, but also because of the CO2 that is spent once in those buildings. We need to use that again and again and again and stop producing new materials. So a lot of people is now having this, that we should just stop producing anything. A lot of architects in Denmark is saying we should stop producing new buildings for 3 years to see if something would change if we did it, just to stop the CO2 emission. Yeah, and city makers of tomorrow knows also that investing in public space is a good investment. I think Copenhagen would not have been succeeded if it was not for the budget that the politicians put into the urban space. And I can see it's easier with big cities as Rīgā and Copenhagen. I can see it's difficult when we go to smaller cities because, of course, the money is less and the urban space is bigger. So I know it's difficult when you go out to rural and small villages, but at least we need to put budget for for designing public spaces and common network so that we can bind the city together. This is an example of both how to invest in the rainwater, but also to invest in city life. It's not as green on the screen as it is here, but it's an investment in city life. It is an investment in health. It is an investment in taking care of the rainwater. It is an investment in biodiversity. It is an investment in local community and society in general. So you can say this money that were put in transforming this traffic roundabout into an urban space, I guess if we look at it holistic, it will be a very good business case. And this was how it looked when it was done. Still a lot of space for cars and bicycles and everybody. And this is how it feels. It is SLA, a landscape architect, that has been designing it. And they are very, very good in understanding the diversity of nature and also how to keep the dead nature as a part of the designing spaces. Yeah. And then I think we have to slow down. I think we have to stop expecting that we have to come fast by car. So I think we have to slow down all traffic in cities to 30 kilometers an hour, and we have to accept that highway is not something we should have everywhere. Otherwise we would not have good enough public transport, and we would not go and walk, and we need to create car spaces for people that needs it. Working people that need to have storage in the car, and handicapped people and old people. The one that needs the car, we need to secure that we take care of them, and that the traffic would be good for them. But I think they would also like to slow down in life in general. Yeah, and I think I also learned that temporarity is a good tool in discussing and evaluating and designing together, and of course always with people in mind, feeling the city. Yeah, that was it. Two fingers.
Thank you for a very interesting and comprehensive presentation. It has given me a lot to think about, how we feel and experience cities, and one of them is definitely to go swim in the Copenhagen harbor to experience the city different next time I'm there.
Yeah.
But on my question, as someone who loves Riga and loves cities, one of the most tragic things is to see this expectation or this culture that is thriving these days, that it is not only good but is also inevitable to when you grow up, get a job, to move outside the city, to get your own home, and that it's I guess that the living in the city is something that you should escape from. And it's not an easy question, but maybe you have some remarks or some comments on what we could do, not only as planners or policymakers, but also as just regular, interested, concerned citizens, to try to change this and try to get, I guess, more people to experience cities.
Mm. I can say what, maybe it can be my own personal story, because when I moved to Copenhagen, I was studying architecture. I was around 21, and I came from the outskirts of Jutland. What made me stay in the city? Because then we got I got pregnant with my daughter Agnes, and we began to talk about this moving out of the city as our parents did. So in a way you can say it was a coding, that it was a natural coding that we should go out of the city. But what's changed it was that both that I was having kid when I was a student, so I couldn't move out at once, but it was not you could not have kids in the system at that time. So you can say we can begin to talk about our educational system, that we design an educational system where we can have kids. And in the way it is in Copenhagen or in Denmark, you get a small amount of money when you're studying. So it's a part of our welfare system. So if we don't get those money, then we cannot study freely. That is changed now. I don't know how the educational system is here. Then we had this cheaper cooperative where we could live. So the housing prices and the different ownership of housing is also a part of it. I don't know how it is here. In Copenhagen we had affordable housing. 25% of all housing is affordable, which everybody can apply to, but they need to apply often when they are kids to be secure that they can come on a list. But it is a way of organizing that you can have cheap housing. Then we had a co-op, so we could afford that. Then we had this free green yard. So we also need to talk about how can we have families in the city. And in our detailed plan, we say this, I think I also said that before, that in our planning regulation, we say that in all housing areas, there should be 40% of recreational space, which means also in the new neighborhood, there is playgrounds, naturescape, so that people go out and have a space for being a part of something. So our garden, as I showed you, was a small community where our kids just could have the freedom to go out of our apartment. So that was also a part of it. Then we just began to go by bike because the beginning of having kids were on the bike. And because it felt so safe to be on bike, and we could easily learn Agnes and Arthur to go on bike to schools, then they could do that. So that was something about the bike lanes and the infrastructure and the pedestrian area. But then you also need to have good common schools, that is not private schools, but public schools. You need to have good kindergarten that is close by. In Paris, they are talking about the 15-minute city. I think that is what Copenhagen has been doing always, or since the last 25 years. And I think that 15-minute city is something that all cities can learn from, big cities or smaller cities or villages, but that you can have an everyday life where you can go shopping, going to kindergarten, going to school within 15 minutes from your home. I think it's a very good language to put into that everyday life. And I guess if that is possible, then I think that people want to stay more and more together in a community instead of living in a single family houses on the outskirts of the city. And I can see also that more and more people in Denmark are living now, families is one grown up or one person families. So there is more families today in Denmark that is with only one person than with more person. And it means also that I think on a longer run, we need to talk about our loneliness, our feeling of loneliness and what comes from that. So I guess that there would be also a common need that we want to live together or have the possibility to be together with other people as a part of it. And I can see it comes more and more also in our housing policy in all cities in Denmark, that we talk about it in a different ways. We need to have smaller spaces, but we need to have more space to be together in. I don't know if that was any. It's a lot of things. I don't think that there is
a lot to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, and not one thing that would solve it. Yeah.
In your story, you mentioned the sum of challenges.
You need to have a microphone.
In the evolution of your story, you mentioned a lot of challenges, and I think it's so complex that there is no level where there's a vision about that. Should it be city level, or should it be even regional level or state level, to go in a certain direction that solve these problems one by one?
Yeah. And in a way you can say, sometimes on a bad day, it seems like, how can we ever go there? And in a good day, you can see that everything helps, that we can all take the responsibility as a part of it. So I'm positive. And I can see in general, when I travel around, I can see that cities are becoming better and better, more and more beautiful, more and more green, more people outside. So I think that the cities is doing better and better. But it needs resources, both time and money, and I can mostly talk from more rich places, as Europe in general is. But it is complex. Yeah.
You mentioned several times the word about banal being, and I think it's
I can't
not
see your eyes, so now I go over here because of.
Oh, yeah, and I think it's actually not about being banal. I think it's about being humble. Because if we look on what is our everyday life, actually everyday life contains all these small, simple issues, which I think we must be reminded every day. So sometimes, because we are sometimes so, I would say, arrogant thinking that everything must be complicated, but actually the city is not complicated. City is actually very simple if you listen, because what we need are very simple things. We need to sit, we need to have a plants, we need time to time we just must remind.
Yeah. I think I have the same, and I also think that feeling the city is also a way of having the conversation, because every one of us we have feelings, so every one of us knows something about it, and therefore everyone can easily do it in a way. So the complication or the complicated understanding is that it's not enough that we feel, because it also has to do with the structuring of it, and therefore it has to deal with the regulation and the organizational stuff and the budget and all the stuff that needs to be a part of it. So for me it is again something with the balance between what we feel and what we can do, and that everybody, it is banal. It is quite banal and simple. But again, it is also very complicated and very structured, and it needs a lot of regulation and not a lot of society making from above. But I think that, yeah, yeah. So both complicated and simple. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your wonderful lecture on feeling the city. So the question that follows for me is, what is your feeling of Riga as a city, as much as you've seen it?
Yeah, I've been here the first time 10 years ago or something like that. Yeah, more. Okay. I'm not getting old at all. So I've seen it over years. I've only been here now for one day this time, but I think that there is something that is similar to Denmark with the topography of the city, and I feel, in a way, I feel at home when I'm here. I don't feel that the scale is too big. I think that there is a history that is still here, and that makes me curious about that. I want to be here for a longer period, and I always have the feeling of that I want to know more about the city. So I think the cultural heritage is quite preserved and is still a part of the identity. I feel at home in the landscape and in the scale of the city. And then the people I know from here is also very having maybe, as you said, that the word humble, I think that there is a connectiveness with people in Riga than with the people that I know, and therefore I feel very secure when I'm here. But it has nothing to do with city planning, I think, or maybe it has. I don't know. But I love Riga. There was a hand here.
At first, I would like to say thank you for bringing new ideas through the years here. I think first you have a lecture about bicycles, and we have a question, do you have a bike? For you, yes, I have 4 or something like that, and we go, oh, so it was something very special. And I would like to ask about very, very specific topic from your this presentation. And it regards greening of our streets. And so it's clear for everyone that, of course, we are interested in greening of our cities. From other hand, or from the same hand, we have this growing activity of users, of residents of the city to be active in development, to impact the neighborhoods. We have growing number of neighborhood associations and a lot of things. And we could see in many cities, quite many cities, in Berlin, in some other cities, that people are able to make their activities on street gardening. Or street greening, yes. And you saw something about this from Copenhagen. I know that in Vancouver and some other cities there are very detailed guidelines for this activity. Could you maybe explore some your feelings about it? Because yes, from one hand it's very, very positive process, but from other hand, these cities are quite not so feeling safe about quality of this greening. What is in Copenhagen? What is positive things and what is negative things about this? Maybe some your feelings about it.
I think I have this one. So I think that I can see that there is this, I also said a little about it, that there is this different view on nature. So one is the different perspective from a maintenance view and from when we talk about wild nature as a new way of talking about nature, that we should just let it grow a little bit more itself. And that is also in Denmark. And I think we have to relearn the I don't know the English word, it's the gardener, taking care of the maintenance people, that they should do something differently. But we also have to acknowledge that it needs new knowledge for them to do it. So I think new knowledge, or knowledge in general, is a key word to understand nature. I thought 10 years ago that I understood nature a lot, and I understand today that I do not understand nature a lot, that there is so many things I do not understand about it. So I need to listen a lot more to acknowledge or knowledge people about the diversity of understanding nature in general. And also when we put that into that climate change, it's changing the climate zones on the earth, and to understand what that means for the way that I look at nature on a specific site makes it even more. And then I had to use the word again, complicated, even though nature is very simple. But there is something in what I thought yesterday should grow here is not what might grow here in 10, 20, 50 years, because the climate change is changing the nature on the earth. So I think on the global perspective, something new or something is changing. And then on the small scale, the maintenance people have to have a new aesthetic or another view of aesthetic. Then people, I think, as with architecture, we have to be better in our language about what is common good and what is something I think is taste for me. And I think there is a lot of aspect with landscape architecture and nature that has the same element, that somebody like the wild flowering this year, and maybe they like purple flowers next year that is standing in a different way. But that has to deal with taste, and we cannot agree on taste because we are diverse. But there is something common in understanding nature that we need to be more clear in our language, and we need to put that into the conversation with the civic society, because it goes together, and we have to also, I think, create maybe not a new language, but to be more diverse in our language about how we experience nature in general. But the same dilemma is in Denmark. A small thing we can do tomorrow is that we can have more school gardens. That is a very positive way of beginning to understand nature as kids. And a school garden is always both a bottom up and a top down, because they need to learn how to put things in the ground. So I think we can control that a little bit and still have a lot of conversations about the irrational and the uncontrolled nature as a part of it.
Hi. Thank you for the lecture to begin with. It's really interesting and some points to reflect on. I also have a very specific question about an item that you presented from the strategy for Copenhagen, which was about this looking into homes and having balconies that are not obstructed, and having that as I'm not sure if it was a policy or a recommendation that there shouldn't be an obstruction, which I found really interesting. And firstly, I thought, oh, that's weird, or not weird, but I actually quite like also looking into other people's houses, because I want to be a fly on the wall and just see how people's everyday life is going on. But at the same time, I'm really intrigued to hear what the conversations about privacy and security were around that. Because I also think that if you have a balcony and you want to tan, or if you want to go out there to cry, you might not want to have onlookers as well. So I would be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, and I think again it's a balance. It's not that you should look into the whole apartment or that the whole of your balcony should be transparent, but maybe you can find the balance so that you both have privacy, but that you are also, when you live in cities, you live in a community. So there is a part of it that is living together with other people, but it doesn't mean that we cannot design privacy as well. I think we can, so it is a balance between both. And it's also, when we talk about urban space, again, we can also create more quiet, private places within the community. So the way that we design the landscape, we can create smaller spaces where the landscape embraces us, or we can be aware. I always have this in Copenhagen. My most private space is along the harbor in Copenhagen. It's on the western side, so there is the harbor edge, and then there is some wooden pathway here. And when you walk, I think there is a difference in 120. And when you walk, you can see the whole urban space, people doing sunbathing, a lot of things over here. But then when you sit down, your eye level goes above, so it becomes quiet, and it's a heated stone, and the wooden floor to sit on that, and then you can see the water, and just by seeing the water, the noise of the water takes over the noise of the city. So you can sit there having a totally privacy space and feeling that you have your own silent in the noise of the city or in the big. So I think we can design spaces if we are aware of how we can feel the city and how we can both have a lot of people and the feeling of your own space. Yeah. There was one more hand, I can't remember where it was. See you later.
Thank you so much for your lecture. Very admirable and very wise woman. I wanted to ask, you mentioned that Copenhagen only started like really thinking and implementing more of like people-centric plans and strategies in like 2005. Can you please explain like what that movement was all, how that movement looked, and like, yeah, was it triggered by something in specific, or was it like a slow incline to implement, like to start thinking about those strategies?
Mm. And I think maybe if you ask the question to another one, the answer would be another one. So this is my answer to that question. I think that it had a lot to do with the political leadership at that time. So we had the Lord Mayor, Ritt Bjerregaard, and a technical environmental mayor, Claus Bundam. And they changed, in a way, the view on our cities. And they were very visionary also in the administration and how we should work. So they started to say that instead of administration, instead of making the administration easy for the people working in the administration, we should make it easy for people wanting to do something in the city. And it's for a period they made a yes office, and as a part of this city life strategy, they said that we need to have this yes office so that if people want to do something in the city, we should say yes, and then help them maybe to make their idea better, but also to help them to make it not complicated in the system. So I think what they did was that they put a strategy that was citywide, or a lot of most different strategies that was citywide, but they also went into the administration, which normally politicians do not do, and administrations get annoyed by it, because normally the politicians should be doing politics and the administration should do the administration. When I started in 2010, Ritt was not the Lord Mayor any longer, and Claus was not the technical mayor any longer. But when I started, some of my colleagues said that they went too much into detail with our policies and stuff like that. Then I could see with my 9 years in Copenhagen, sometimes when I look back, I would have loved that my politicians were going a little more into details. I loved the politicians and the mayors that did it. I loved going to Venice with my mayor and come home and say, now we want to do a new strategy for urban nature. And he was a part of it. And he had a vision for it. And we could talk about it. And we could share knowledge about it. And we could make new knowledge together. And we could publish that strategy paper together as city architect and mayor and directors and all the colleagues that was, because we did it together. So in a way, I think that it's that that one of the things that made the movement was a lot to do with the visionary politicians, and that they wanted to change a bigger culture and not only do a strategic paper that would be a part of something that was hidden away. But I think there could also be a lot of other stories to it. We could not have done it if there wasn't so many good specialist people in the city, and GEL Architect helped, a lot of engineer company helped with the sustainable strategies, and so there was also a lot of positive engagement because of all the energy that was in the series before the economic crisis in 8 and 9. So I think a part of it was also that we were in this movement of positiveness and feeling that we had the power to change. Yeah.